The thing Elias did after opening his eyes was scream because the ceiling above him was carved with golden dragons, painted angels, and enough expensive wood to buy an entire shopping mall. The second thing he did was slap himself 3 times because surely this was another stress dream caused by reading novels until 3 in the morning. The third slap hurt much more than expected, which was very rude of reality. "Congratulations," he muttered to himself. "I've officially been promoted from overworked office employee to unemployed fictional noble." The memories arrived all at once. He had transmigrated into the Duke's Silent Obsession, one of the longest BL novels he had ever read. He hadn't even liked the story. He had only finished it because every time he wanted to quit, the comments insisted, "It gets better after chapter 180. It never got better. Now he was Elias Ashcroft, the lazy second son of a declining noble family. In the original novel, Elias appeared for exactly 4 chapters. His greatest achievement was insulting the male lead at a banquet before immediately losing all his family's money through terrible investments. He later disappeared into history after trying to sell fake miracle medicine that accidentally turned everyone's hair green. What an incredible legacy. Elias rubbed his face while recalling the story. The main couple consisted of the terrifying Duke Cassian Blackwood and the Empire's innocent saint. Their romance involved misunderstandings, political conspiracies, attempted assassinations, magical curses, emotional trauma, 5 fake breakups, 3 kidnappings, and enough communication problems to power an entire city. "I refuse." He stood dramatically on the bed before remembering he was wearing silk pajamas and slipped onto the floor. "I refuse romance, I refuse politics, I refuse getting kidnapped, I especially refuse becoming comic relief with green hair." He crawled back onto the bed with as much dignity as someone who had just fallen could possess. "If I'm already inside this ridiculous novel, I'm making money." Unlike everyone else in this world, Elias possessed knowledge from modern Earth. He understood supply chains, marketing, branding, accounting, customer psychology, and one very important truth. Rich people would buy absolutely anything if it looked expensive enough. His eyes sparkled. "I'm going to become the richest merchant in the empire." His father nearly fainted when Elias voluntarily came downstairs before noon. Lady Ashcroft quietly touched his forehead. "Are you ill?" "No." His older brother narrowed his eyes. "Did you lose another bet?" "No." The family stared suspiciously. Elias smiled. "I've simply decided to become successful." 3 servants dropped trays. His father slowly sat down. "Who are you and what have you done with my son?" "I am your son." "Prove it." "I still hate spinach." "Correct." His father sighed with relief. "Thank goodness." Elias cleared his throat. "I'd like permission to use one abandoned warehouse." His father blinked. "For gambling." "For business." Everyone laughed. His father laughed the hardest. "Oh, that's adorable." "I'm serious." His brother wiped away tears. You once bought a horse because the seller said it looked optimistic." "The horse did look optimistic. It was blind." "It was optimistic despite the blindness." His family laughed even harder. Elias waited patiently. Finally his father sighed. "Fine, use the warehouse. If it keeps you occupied, everyone wins." "Wonderful. No borrowing family money." "I don't need it." "No embarrassing the family." "I'll try." "What does that mean?" "It means expectations should remain flexible." The abandoned warehouse smelled like dust, old wood, and forgotten dreams. Elias clapped his hands. "This place is perfect." The old caretaker looked around the empty building. "Perfect for what?" "For becoming rich." The caretaker politely nodded in the same way people nodded at harmless lunatics. Elias spent the next several days recruiting workers. He hired retired craftsmen whom nobody wanted. He hired widows who needed stable work. He hired young apprentices who had been rejected everywhere because they lacked experience. He hired one old accountant whose greatest hobby was correcting strangers' arithmetic. The accountant nearly cried when Elias handed him organized financial records. "You balance the numbers." "Yes." "They actually balance." "They should." "I think I love you." "I'm flattered, but I'm emotionally unavailable until profit." The old man immediately accepted the job. Elias' first product confused everyone. Luxury soap. Not magical soap. Not healing soap. Just soap. The merchants laughed. Who pays extra to become clean? Elias smiled. People who want everyone else to know they paid extra. The room became silent. One merchant frowned. That's actually disturbing. That's marketing. He created beautiful boxes. Elegant ribbons. Fancy names. Ocean breeze. Imperial rose. Golden morning. Midnight cedar. One noblewoman picked up a beautifully wrapped bar. This smells exactly like ordinary lavender. Correct. Then why is it 5 times more expensive? Presentation. She looked at the packaging again. I'll take 12. The merchant beside her gasped. Why? So my sister knows I can afford it. Elias quietly wrote down another successful business strategy. Human pride remained wonderfully reliable across worlds. Within 3 months, business exploded. His warehouse became a factory. His factory became 2 factories. His workers received higher wages than most merchants offered. People stopped quitting. Competitors became deeply offended. One rival merchant stormed into Elias' office. You're ruining business. I'm improving business. You pay workers too much. They work harder. They're loyal. Exactly. That's unfair. That's employment. The merchant stormed away muttering about economic betrayal. Soon Elias expanded into perfumes. Tea blends, luxury notebooks, stylish ink bottles, decorated candles, and travel bags. Every ordinary product suddenly became desirable after Elias convinced customers they represented sophistication. He also introduced something completely revolutionary. Customer feedback. Every purchase included a small card asking buyers what they liked and disliked. The noble spent hours writing dramatic reviews. The ribbon should express more confidence. This candle understands me. The soap lacks emotional maturity. Elias framed that last review. It deserved recognition. His success inevitably reached the imperial palace. One afternoon an invitation arrived. His father stared at the royal seal. What did you do? Probably something profitable. Why does the palace want you? They're buying soap. His brother looked horrified. You sold soap to royalty. Everyone bathes. Not everyone survives selling to royalty. The palace meeting was far less terrifying than expected. Mostly because the officials spent 40 minutes arguing about scented candles. One minister insisted lavender inspired productivity. Another claimed lavender encouraged laziness. A third argued candles had no political opinions. Elias quietly waited until they finished. The emperor looked exhausted. You seem remarkably calm. I've worked retail. I don't know what that means. It means nothing frightens me anymore. The emperor decided not to ask further questions. After securing a massive contract supplying luxury goods to the palace, Elias walked through the capital feeling victorious. He had done it: no romance, no drama, no dangerous noble politics. Just peaceful business. Then someone accidentally crashed into him. His papers scattered across the street. Another person immediately bent down to help collect them. Large hands, black leather gloves, perfect posture, expensive boots. Elias froze. Very slowly. He looked upward. Dark silver hair, sharp features, cold gray eyes. An expression so emotionless it could freeze summer itself. Duke Cassian Blackwood. The male lead. The most terrifying man in the empire. The same man responsible for defeating 3 rebellions before breakfast. The same man who smiled exactly twice in the original novel. Both occasions terrified witnesses. Cassian silently handed back the scattered documents. You dropped these. His voice was calm and deep. Elias accepted them with shaking hands. Thank you. Cassian glanced at the business proposals. You organized national shipping routes. Yes. They're efficient. I like efficiency. So do I. An awkward silence followed. Elias desperately remembered the original story. The Duke wasn't supposed to meet him for another year. Why now? Cassian studied him. You solved a logistics problem the ministry has failed to address for 6 years. I dislike wasting money. So do I. Another silence. Passersby cautiously walked around them. Nobody wanted to interrupt the terrifying Duke. Finally, Cashin spoke again. Would you attend a business meeting at my estate tomorrow? Ilias' brain immediately screamed. Absolutely not. This is how side characters die. Run. Hide. Fake your own death. Move to another continent. Instead, his mouth smiled politely. I'd be honored. His brain filed a formal complaint against his mouth. As Ilias walked home clutching his documents, he sighed dramatically. So much for avoiding the male lead. Behind him, Duke Cashin watched him leave. For the first time in months. The Duke smiled. His bewildered knights stared in horror. One whispered, did his grace just smile? Another crossed himself. I think the world is ending. The oldest knight sighed. No. I think his grace just found someone interesting. The next morning, Ilias stood outside Blackwood Estate with the determined expression of a man attending his own execution. The mansion towered over the capital like it had personally intimidated every other building into becoming shorter. Even the flowers in the gardens looked disciplined. The hedges had sharp corners. The statues looked as though they filed military reports every morning. Ilias had never seen landscaping that appeared ready to declare war. A butler welcomed him with a perfect bow. Master Ilias, his grace has been expecting you. I was hoping he'd forget. I'm afraid his grace has an excellent memory. That's unfortunate for me. The butler almost smiled but caught himself before committing such an unprofessional act. He escorted Ilias through several enormous hallways until they reached a meeting room where Duke Cashin was already waiting with maps, financial ledgers, shipping manifests, and enough paperwork to frighten an accountant. Cashin looked up. You arrived 3 minutes early. I dislike being late. So do I. Another silence settled over the room. Ilias quickly realized that speaking with the Duke was like playing chess against someone who only moved every 15 minutes but somehow still won every match. Cashin pushed several documents toward him. Review these. Ilias glanced through the papers. The Duke controlled enormous iron mines, timber forests, ports, and trading routes, yet many of his businesses were losing money. He frowned. You have incompetent managers. Cashin nodded. I know. You knew. Yes. Then why haven't you replaced them? I wanted proof. You've had proof for years. I wanted better proof. Ilias stared. You enjoy watching people expose their own stupidity, don't you? Yes. You could have simply fired them. I preferred evidence. Ilias leaned back in his chair. You know what? What? I think you're terrifying for completely different reasons than the novel described. Cashin tilted his head. The novels. I meant the stories. I see. Cashin clearly did not understand, but he accepted the explanation. Ilias spent the next hour circling mistakes with a pen. This manager purchases wood during winter when prices are highest. Cashin nodded. He is an idiot. This one sends empty wagons back instead of transporting goods. I noticed. This one hired his cousin. The cousin cannot count. He manages finances. I know. Ilias put the papers down. I've diagnosed the problem. What is it? Your businesses suffer from an aggressive allergy to competent people. For the first time, one corner of Cashin's mouth lifted slightly. The knights guarding the room exchanged horrified glances. His grace almost smiled again. The apocalypse was definitely approaching. Cashin offered Ilias a position as his chief business consultant. Ilias refused immediately. No. Why? I enjoy sleeping peacefully. The position pays well. I also enjoy remaining alive. You believe working for me is dangerous. I've read enough stories. Cashin folded his hands. I do not intend to kill you. I'm relieved that's only because you don't intend to. You are unusual. I hear that often. You challenge me. I definitely hear that often. Cashin studied him quietly before asking, would you instead accept individual consulting contracts? Ilias thought for a moment. That would allow him to earn money while avoiding becoming involved in noble politics. I'll accept. Good. When do we begin? We already have. Elias blinked. You've been asking business questions this entire meeting. I have. You tricked me. I persuaded you. You absolutely tricked me. Cashin looked surprisingly pleased. Word spread through the capital at frightening speed. The mysterious merchant who had transformed half the city's economy was now advising the empire's coldest duke. Naturally, the rumors became increasingly ridiculous. One version claimed Elias possessed magical eyes that could see hidden gold. Another claimed he negotiated business deals with dragons. Someone insisted he had convinced pirates to pay taxes voluntarily. Elias heard that rumor and laughed so hard he nearly dropped his tea. Who invents these things? His accountant answered without looking up. People with free time. They should find employment. They're nobles. Exactly. One afternoon, Elias visited the largest market in the capital. Instead of disguising himself like most wealthy merchants, he openly chatted with vendors. How are sales? Better since your shipping reforms. What about deliveries? They arrive on time now. Any complaints? 1. What is it? Customers keep asking whether we'll sell your luxury soap. Elias grinned. I'll arrange that. Nearby merchants watched in confusion. Why is the owner asking customers what they want? Another merchant shrugged. Maybe that's why he's rich. Later that week, Elias attended a gathering of the Merchant Association. The president proudly announced a contest. The merchant who presents the greatest innovation this year will receive exclusive trading rights with the Western provinces. Everyone became excited. One merchant unveiled stronger wagon wheels. Another introduced waterproof barrels. Someone displayed self-heating lunch boxes using simple magic stones. Then it became Elias' turn. He placed an ordinary wooden box onto the table. Everyone looked disappointed. That's it. Elias nodded. Open it. Inside were dozens of neatly arranged cards. One merchant frowned. Pieces of paper. They're loyalty cards. Silence. What? If customers make 10 purchases, the 11th is free. The room remained silent. A merchant scratched his head. That sounds expensive. It isn't. Why? Because customers will buy 10 things they never intended to purchase just to receive one they didn't need. The room became quiet again. One old merchant slowly stood. Young man. Yes. You're either a genius or the greatest manipulator I've ever met. I prefer entrepreneur. The judges unanimously declared Elias the winner. Several merchants immediately began copying the idea. Elias had expected that. Which was why his own loyalty cards included beautiful artwork and collectible designs. Customers started trying to collect every version. People willingly spent extra money to complete their collections. His competitors nearly cried. Business meetings with Cashin became a weekly routine. Somehow the Duke always prepared tea. He remembered exactly how Elias preferred it. He listened carefully whenever Elias explained new ideas. He never interrupted. He asked intelligent questions. He implemented every suggestion almost immediately. One afternoon, Elias paused mid-conversation. You're surprisingly easy to work with. Cashin looked genuinely confused. Why would I hire an expert if I intended to ignore him? That's actually a very reasonable question. My generals say I listen well. I think that's because they're terrified. They are. You know. Yes. You've never considered smiling more often. I smile. No. I do. I've seen glaciers express more emotion. Cashin considered this. I shall practice. The next morning he attempted a smile. His knight screamed. One dropped his sword. Another whispered, His Grace looks like he's announcing someone's execution. Cashin sighed. I require additional practice. Meanwhile, the original story continued without Elias' involvement. The saint entered the capital. The royal banquet occurred. Several nobles plotted against one another. Assassins appeared. Political conspiracies unfolded. Elias remained blissfully occupied calculating shipping costs. His assistant rushed into the office. Master, the palace is surrounded. Elias looked up from his ledger. That's unfortunate. Shouldn't we be worried? Can they interrupt today's deliveries? Probably not. Excellent. He returned to balancing accounts. His assistant blinked. I've never met anyone less interested in politics. Politics rarely pays invoices. Unfortunately, politics became interested in him. Several jealous nobles disliked watching a common merchant gain influence. One evening a marquis blocked Elias' path. You've grown arrogant. I've grown busy. You forget your place. I know exactly where I am. The marquis sneered. People like you exist because nobles allow it. Elias smiled pleasantly. Actually, people like me exist because nobles keep buying expensive soap. Several nearby merchants burst into laughter. The marquis turned red. You insolent. Before he could finish speaking, another voice interrupted. Is there a problem? Everyone froze. Duke Cashin had arrived. The crowd instinctively stepped backward. Even the marquis suddenly discovered an overwhelming interest in the weather. No problem at all, Your Grace. Cashin looked at Elias. Were you insulted? A little. Cashin turned toward the marquis. Apologize. The marquis swallowed. I apologize. Louder. I'm sorry. Properly. The apology lasted nearly 3 full minutes. By the end, even Elias felt embarrassed for him. After the marquis fled, Elias sighed. You didn't have to do that. He was wasting your time. I could have handled it. I know. Then why intervened? Cashin answered so naturally that he didn't realize what he had revealed. Because I dislike seeing capable people treated unfairly. Elias smiled. That's kinder than your reputation suggests. Cashin looked away for a brief moment. I am merely practical. From a nearby rooftop, one of Cashin's knights quietly whispered to another, His Grace escorted Master Elias home yesterday. I know. He also personally chose tea leaves for today's meeting. I know. He cancelled military drills because Master Elias mentioned being tired. I know. The younger knight looked horrified. Is His Grace courting him? The older knight sighed deeply. I think His Grace has been courting him for weeks. The problem is, I'm not sure His Grace realizes he's doing it. Both knights looked toward Cashin, who was seriously explaining grain transportation to Elias while unconsciously matching his walking pace to Elias' shorter stride. The older knight shook his head. Our duke conquered half the northern territories. Yes. But romance may be his greatest military defeat. Elias remained completely oblivious. If someone had handed him a detailed report titled 101 Signs Duke Cashin is Hopelessly in Love with You, he would have skimmed the first page, corrected the grammar, complimented the formatting, and concluded it was an interesting piece of fiction. To him, Cashin was simply a very competent business partner. An unusually handsome business partner. An intimidating business partner. A business partner who somehow remembered every tiny preference Elias had ever mentioned. Perfectly normal. Absolutely professional. Not suspicious at all. The people around them were slowly losing their minds. One morning, Elias casually mentioned that walking between his warehouses was tiring. The following afternoon, an entire paved road connected every one of his businesses. The city workers completed it in record time. Elias stared at the smooth stone road. The government works surprisingly fast. His accountant slowly turned to look at him. The government. Yes. The Duke personally financed this road. He said efficient merchants improve the empire. That's reasonable. The accountant pinched the bridge of his nose. You are either the smartest merchant alive or the densest man ever born. I've been called both. I'm beginning to understand why. As Elias' fortune continued growing, he expanded beyond the capital. He introduced scheduled trade caravans instead of random departures. He created standardized contracts that everyone could understand. He started the empire's first merchant insurance program. When a caravan was robbed, merchants no longer lost everything. When crops failed, emergency warehouses released affordable grain. When villages struggled through winter, Elias quietly reduced prices instead of increasing them. His accountant frowned. You know this earns less profit. It earns loyal customers. They'll remember. Exactly. Within 2 years, merchants across the empire trusted Elias more than several noble houses. People joked that taxes reached the capital faster if they were addressed to Elias first. The emperor laughed so hard when he heard the joke that he nearly spilled his tea. I should probably hire him as chancellor. A minister nervously replied, please don't, every noble family would panic. They're already panicking. Exactly. Naturally, Elias' success attracted competition. One wealthy merchant named Roland believed no newcomer deserved greater fame than him. Roland challenged Elias publicly. I challenge you to a merchant's competition. Elias sighed. Can't we simply continue making money separately? No. Why? My pride. I was afraid you'd say that. The competition lasted 3 days. The first challenge involved negotiation. Roland spent 4 hours arguing over tiny discounts. Elias simply asked the supplier, what would make this partnership beneficial for both of us over the next 10 years? The supplier immediately signed with him. Roland looked horrified. You didn't even negotiate. I did. You accepted his first price. I accepted a better long-term relationship. The supplier smiled. I'll be lowering prices for him every year. Roland stared blankly. Oh. The second challenge involved advertising. Roland hired musicians, actors, dancers, and fireworks. His grand presentation attracted thousands. Elias borrowed one empty chair. He placed it in the middle of the square with a sign. Reserved for tomorrow's richest customer. People immediately formed a line asking how to qualify. By sunset, every product had sold out. Roland looked at the empty chair. I hate him. The final challenge tested financial planning. Both men received the same amount of starting capital and 1 month to increase it. Roland invested everything in luxury jewelry. Elias invested in flour. Everyone laughed. Until unexpected flooding destroyed several harvests. Bread prices rose. Jewelry sales collapsed. Flour became more valuable than silver. Elias quietly donated part of his supply to poor neighborhoods before selling the remainder at fair prices. His profit still doubled. The people loved him even more. Roland surrendered. I cannot defeat someone who somehow predicts disasters. Elias smiled awkwardly. I've simply read a lot. That evening Cashin invited Elias to dinner. Unlike their usual meetings filled with contracts and ledgers, there wasn't a single business document in sight. Instead, there were candles, elegant dishes, soft music, and flowers. Elias looked around. This is a strange place for discussing shipping routes. Cashin blinked. We are not discussing shipping routes. We aren't. No. Oh. Elias waited. Cashin waited. The servants quietly backed out of the room. Outside the dining hall, every servant gathered near the doors. The head butler whispered, tonight is the night. A maid clasped her hands. Please let His Grace succeed. Another servant sighed. If Master Elias mistakes this for another business meeting, I'm resigning. Inside the dining room, Cashin cleared his throat. Elias. Yes. We have worked together for over 2 years. We have. I admire your intelligence. Thank you. Your kindness. That's nice. Your honesty. I appreciate that. Your company. Likewise. Cashin took a slow breath. I have fallen in love with you. Elias smiled politely. That's very flattering. Cashin waited. Nothing happened. You heard me. I did. I said I love you. I know. I am confessing. I understand. Cashin frowned. You have no reaction. I do. What is it? I'm impressed by your communication skills. Cashin stared. You believe this is hypothetical. Isn't it? It is not. Elias laughed. Very funny. I am serious. You've maintained the joke for quite a while. I have never joked about this. Silence filled the room. Elias slowly looked around. The candles. The flowers. The expensive wine. The servants secretly peeking through the doorway. Cashin's slightly nervous expression. Everything suddenly clicked together. Wait. Cashin nodded once. Oh. Another long silence followed. Finally, Elias buried his face in both hands. I am the biggest idiot in the empire. Outside the room, the servants quietly celebrated. He figured it out. It only took 2 years. I won the betting pool. The head butler proudly collected his winnings. I told you Master Elias would understand eventually. Elias looked back at Cashin. I honestly thought you were just exceptionally supportive. I attempted subtle courtship. You financed roads. They were useful. You remembered my favorite tea. It made you smile. You bought the bakery because I said I liked their pastries. They were excellent pastries. You frightened a marquis into apologizing for 3 minutes. He deserved 4. Elias couldn't help laughing. You really are terrible at subtlety. I have never courted anyone before. I noticed. Cashin actually looked embarrassed. I consulted books. They lied. Apparently. They both started laughing. It was the first time anyone in the empire had heard Duke Cashin laugh freely. Outside, several guards nearly dropped their spears. His Grace is laughing. I know. I'm frightened. So am I. Elias thought quietly for several moments. I need to confess something too. Cashin listened carefully. When I first met you, I planned to avoid you forever. Cashin raised an eyebrow. Forever. I accidentally ended up in a complicated situation where I knew certain events before they happened. Cashin looked curious but not suspicious. I don't fully understand. Neither do I. I only wanted a peaceful life making money. And now? Elias smiled. Now I realize peaceful lives sometimes include inconveniently handsome dukes. Cashin's ears turned slightly red. The servants outside gasped. Did His Grace blush? I think he did. We're definitely celebrating tonight. Months later, the empire hosted its largest merchant festival. The emperor personally awarded Elias the title of Imperial Grand Merchant, a position that had never existed before. During the ceremony, the emperor laughed. When this young man first entered the palace, he sold us expensive soap. The nobles chuckled. Now he practically runs the empire's economy. Everyone applauded. The emperor turned toward Cashin. And somehow you managed to convince him to marry you. Cashin answered calmly. It required patience. Elias coughed. It required 2 years because I mistook every romantic gesture for business networking. The entire hall burst into laughter. Even the usually serious ministers smiled. After their marriage, absolutely nothing changed where work was concerned. They still argued over shipping routes. They still debated investment strategies. They still competed over who could solve accounting problems faster. The only difference was that Cashin occasionally interrupted meetings to hand Elias snacks. Board members quickly accepted this as normal. One new manager whispered, "Should we continue discussing grain exports?" The senior manager nodded. Yes. What about His Grace feeding pastries to his husband? Ignore it. They're discussing wheat prices while sharing dessert. They've always been strange. Years later, children across the empire studied Elias' business methods. Merchants copied his contracts. Guilds adopted his employee policies. Roads connected provinces that had once been isolated. Trade flourished. Families escaped poverty. Even rival merchants admitted the empire had become richer because one transmigrated office worker had refused to chase romance and instead chased profit. Ironically, profit led him straight to romance anyway. One peaceful evening, Elias relaxed on the balcony beside Cashin. Looking over the brightly lit capital, he smiled. You know, I originally entered this world determined not to become part of the novel. Cashin took his hand. And yet, I accidentally wrote a better ending. Cashin smiled, a genuine warm smile that still shocked anyone seeing it for the first time. I agree. Elias laughed. So the lesson is simple. What lesson? If life offers you political conspiracies, ignore them. Cashin nodded. If life offers you romance. Elias leaned against his husband with a grin. Double-check that your business partner isn't actually flirting with you. Cashin chuckled. I still cannot believe you thought I financed roads out of professional courtesy. You have to admit it sounded possible. It did not. It really did. It truly did not. Their laughter echoed across the balcony while the prosperous empire below continued to thrive, proving that sometimes the greatest love story began not with destiny, prophecy, or dramatic fate, but with a merchant who simply wanted to sell expensive soap and a cold duke who fell hopelessly in love with the brilliant fool who changed an empire. The end.